Welcome to Current Situation, your weekly political pulse. I'm your host, Joshua Gale, alongside South Carolina State House Representative Jordan Pace. Every week, our goal is to help you navigate the complex world of politics through a biblically conservative perspective. Before we jump into this week's conversation, let's take a word from our sponsor.
Smashing Plastic Pickleball podcast is going to be about the three most amazing things about pickleball. Number one, the community. Number two, the health benefits. And lastly, but most importantly, is fun. The podcast of Smashing Plastic Pickleball is going to emphasize on fun. Yes, fundamentals of playing pickleball will be a part of what we talk about, but most importantly, just the fun of pickleball. That is Smashing Plastic Pickleball, and we want to have you tune into our podcast today.
In this episode, Jordan and I are going to reconvene on what happened in this year's legislative session and what that looks like to the folks out there who don't understand how it works and the time period around it. We're going to talk about some missed opportunities and some misplaced priorities, which are specifically the voters and the people of South Carolina. Jordan, it's been a long legislative session and you've worked extremely hard. And we are here on episode 20. So we're 20 weeks strong in the Current Situation podcast. We thank everybody who's been listening along with us. And we hope to catch you up on this episode with some of what happened this year and what we can actually do about it.
Yeah. So the legislative session, it runs January through May, and it's a 2-year cycle. So last year, January through May, if something didn't pass by the second week in May when we adjourned, then it could come back this year. But because it's a 2-year cycle, this is year 2. Anything that hasn't passed by last Thursday is dead on, like it's done. It's dead. Mm-hmm. It has to be refiled for next year in the next legislative session. So something that's, when we say it's dead, it's actually dead, mostly. Like anything in politics, there's always an asterisk involved, and we'll get to that in a second. But so we adjourn May 9th, and we will come back, though, for a couple of days in June. No new legislation can be filed or brought up. Basically, just things that have gone to conference reports. That's where the House and the Senate both pass a different version of a bill. They each send 3 members to a committee, and that committee tries to work out the differences between the two. Sometimes they work it out. Sometimes they don't. We've got the CRT bill, so as it's been referred to, has been in conference for like a year and a half. And they're meeting one more time on June 5th to see if they can work something out. So sometimes they can and sometimes they can't.
Right.
But all that to say, we passed some good things. So we passed Help Not Harm was one of the first things that passed. This was to shut down pediatric transgender hormones and surgeries and those kind of things. So none at all for under those under 18, and then no taxpayer money, period, underage or adult, will go toward that. So that was good. Past that, House, Senate, Governor should be signing it. If he didn't sign it today, then very soon, hopefully this week. Several things went to conference, so they're kind of somewhere on life support, so to speak. One of the things that we didn't pass, that the House kind of passed a version of, but really didn't solve the problem, even the House version, is this, the problem with tort reform, or some people call it joint several liability problems, or you might have heard of it as the venue crisis. So several years ago, the legislature increased the liability minimums for venues that serve alcohol. So bars, restaurants, event venues, anybody that serves alcohol, ups it to $1 million policy minimum. But along with that, we also have this problem, or the way that we do lawsuits in South Carolina, specifically with alcohol, is that if someone's found liable in a lawsuit, even if it's just 1% liable, they could wind up paying 100% of the judgment, which is not that way in any other measure of the law, unless it has to do with alcohol or drugs or something, some sort of illegal activity. So because of that, a lot of the insurance companies have left the state. We did a whole episode about this. We had Mark Heath come on and kind of get us dive into the details.
Yeah.
We heard
and if
just
you guys
recently
want to look at that, that was episode 11.
Yeah.
Unraveling Insurance, Rising Rates, Regulations, and Responsibilities.
So we've had restaurants, VFWs, American Legions closing left and right all over the state. I mean, these specifically like the bars and restaurants, these are people's livelihoods, they're small businesses, and they're, I mean, shutting down. Yesterday, one of the biggest and oldest venues in Greenville, a place called Blind Horse Saloon, shut down.
Yeah.
And
that news has made it all the way through North Carolina, and and there's some folks that are not happy with that. And that's, you know, whether you care for bars and restaurants, you know, certain things, these are tax-paying people. These are the people paying a harsh price when we have some other legislation that should take priority. Yeah.
So these guys showed up multiple times. The SU Venue Crisis Organization showed up multiple times at the State House, pleading, asking, can we get something passed? The House passed kind of a Band-Aid bill. I think it was 5066. That would kind of lower the liability minimums down from $1 million if restaurants did certain things, and it lowered it down to like $100,000 for nonprofits like VFWs and American Legions. I think that would have helped slow down that increase that they're dealing with in their premiums. It wouldn't fix the underlying issue. The Senate, one of my colleagues in the House, a guy named Ryan McCabe, he's a pretty brilliant lawyer himself. He introduced an amendment to that bill that would have solved this whole problem, that would have essentially taken alcohol out of the exemption and put it with everything else. So made it proportional. So if you are found 30% liable, you pay 30% of the judgment. If you're found 75% liable, you're paid 75% of the judgment. That's the way it is with everything else. Unfortunately, despite the bill dealing with this exact issue, it was ruled to be not germane to the bill, which is completely insane. Basically, they shut it down procedurally. The Senate had a different bill too that would have been, I think, better, that actually had some tort reform in it, and rather than just messing with the minimums. But it didn't go anywhere. The Senate, I don't think the Senate quite got it off the floor. It got bounced back to committee. So obviously the House didn't pick it up either. And that's one of those things we're talking about, misplaced priorities. So the House jammed through dozens of bills. I mean, everything from increasing the price of turkey tags to trying to pass this health czar bill to grow the size of government pretty enormously and without knowing the price tag. They prioritize those things, but not helping these small businesses. And that was kind of the story of the session, was occasionally do something good and then a whole bunch of other stuff that shouldn't be the priority of what we're dealing with. I mean, we passed a bill to name the state seabird. And it changed. Like, it was one thing in the House, and the Senate changed it to the brown pelican because they were concerned that the Latin name of the bird that we put in, some skimmer, something seabird, I don't know. They were concerned that the Latin name could be offensive if people read it. So they changed it to the brown pelican and then sent it back. Like, why are we doing this when there's all these other things that we should be dealing with? Right. That was kind of the story of the session.
Wow. It seems like major misaligned priorities. So the ones that don't concern the taxpayer, the hardworking people of South Carolina. So you can go back at this entire legislative session. If these are things that bother you, look at the voting record. Look at the representatives that represent you, and look what they voted on these different bills in the House and in the Senate. Do not just take people's word for it. I got a piece of mail from Sandy Sin the other day that tries to, it's jumping on a bandwagon of border security and all these
Yeah.
different things, and her, taking credit for things that the House passed,
Mhm.
wasn't even in the Senate, and just trying to talk about all these things. Number one, we could have done so much more about voting integrity this year.
We did nothing.
We
Absolutely
did nothing. So it's a political game where they want to send you mailers about hot topic, hot button issues.
Yep.
To make you think that they are your conservative candidate. They are not. Sandy Sin is not a truly conservative candidate. She's very progressive. She's doing she is, if you're not paying attention in her race with Matt Lieber, she's doing some nasty below the belt stuff.
Yeah.
Bringing his young daughter in it. I watched a video the other day of it in the entire debate. And I always look at things through a lens of, hey, let's not be biased here. She told his young 20-year-old daughter, hey, neither of your parents chose you. The judge decided where you went, and they split you up, but no one chose you. Your parents didn't choose you. The court split you up. You never tell a young child that they weren't chosen and that they were just subject to a divorce court.
Yeah. Now, I think I saw that same video, and I texted Matt afterward and told him he raised a good daughter, because his daughter pushed back on Sandy and said, "You don't know what you're talking about," and she laid into him. Or she did. She laid into her.
She did, and she's got some misinformation.
Yeah,
somebody who's
absolutely.
who's claiming to do a lot in the Senate, and especially and not around the things that we as conservatives care about either. She has some misinformation from her campaign of that Matt doesn't have a degree when Matt's got an associate's degree, and Matt is a combat veteran. Who in their right mind attacks a combat veteran for their valor?
But look, this is the same lady who a couple of weeks ago when we were doing judicial elections, and one good thing we did I guess two things during the judicial elections. The new Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court, Justice Kitteridge, he wrote the majority opinion that upheld the heartbeat bill. So it's good. He's a strong conservative, good guy. But there was a Democrat, former Democrat gubernatorial nominee, so a guy who ran for governor against Haley as a Democrat, James Smith, who's a nice enough guy. He's a combat veteran. Like, he fought in Iraq and Afghanistan as a National Guard. But his political positions are awful. I mean, he was a huge advocate for Planned Parenthood, won awards from him. Far, far, far left. Politically, he was up as a judge, to be a judge, a circuit court judge, unopposed. He made it. Right. The other guy was kind of forced to drop out. So he was going to sail in, and thankfully enough pressure was put on the House that enough of the Republicans who supported him flipped, because many of us were very upset and we're going to make hay about it. And he was recommitted. Basically, they invented a way to get rid of him, thankfully, and sent him back so he wouldn't be a judge. But during the process by which they were using this maneuver so that he wouldn't get affirmed as a judge, Sandy Sin jumped up and objected to it. Yes, on the floor. I was 20 feet away from her, and I was befuddled by the whole thing. Just very confused, like what was happening. She jumped up and she voted, to try to stop it. Thankfully, she was unsuccessful, but there's not a whole lot that surprised me from her.
So when you get these mailers, you have to, obviously somebody's going to try to paint themselves in a light, and they're trying to arise an emotional catalyst in you for things that you may care about. They have your information. These politicians know how you voted in the past. They know the issues that you care about. And so you're going to get mailers on hot topics, and politicians know what you care most about and what people are thinking about the most right now. You cannot play into the political playbook and say, you know what, that's our guy, that's our girl. Based on the mailers that you get, you have to do your research, and you can't believe everything that you're doing out there. Yeah. I know for a fact that people that, are running some campaigns around here have been sued in defamation lawsuits because they're willing to do anything and say anything to try to get their person elected. You cannot trust everything you hear.
Yeah. a lot of these mailers aren't even coming from candidates. They're coming from kind of these dark money groups. And I've seen several from around the state that are making claims that, such and such legislator wrote a bill to, give women the death penalty for having abortions. But none of like the people that they claimed wrote this bill and supported the bill weren't even co-sponsors of anything remotely like it. They're just totally making this stuff up and just seeing if it sticks.
Right.
So fact
Because
check
there's
them.
no recourse.
Right. Exactly. That stuff about illegal immigration. I just saw a report came out yesterday and was kind of republished on some news sites today that somewhere between 10 and 27% of undocumented migrants or illegal immigrants, whatever you want to call them,
Mm-hmm.
are registered to vote across the country.
Wow.
So in the House, we try to add a budget amendment to prevent the voter registration forms from being in the packets for like the welfare and Medicaid stuff packets for non-citizens.
Right.
Because we had some reports of that from the upstate where these families from
Several reports.
they're getting not just one in their packet, they'd return them, and then they keep sending, the Health and Human Services Medicaid Department in South Carolina would keep sending them these forms, these voter registration declination forms over and over and over again. They keep sending them back saying we're not citizens.
Using taxpayer dollars.
Using taxpayer dollars to do it. So we put an amendment up. Adam Morgan, as the chairman of the Freedom Caucus, he put an amendment up to try to shut that down, and it was ruled non-germane. We forced a vote on it anyway, and we only had 14 votes in favor of it.
Wow.
So, there's a lot of, I won't say misinformation, but blurring of the truth. Let's just, we'll put it that way.
Right. Or some people that don't want to step into some honest, true things because they're afraid of what they might face in an election year, things like that, when they won't do what's the right thing to do.
Yeah. We had none, like you mentioned earlier about voter integrity. We had a great bill called the SAVE Act. It's an acronym. I think Matt Lieber was actually the lead sponsor on it. Charleston County delegation put it together. I jumped on there with them and kind of built it together. Based on several other election integrity bills, filed it. It went nowhere. Not even a breath of attention to it. And when asked, they were just basically we were told, it's just not a priority. We don't have time for it. But we had time to pass like state-supported, taxpayer-supported horse gambling and a hate crime bill and, like I said, this healthcare czar fiasco.
Right.
Like we had time for those, but not for election integrity. Totally misaligned priorities.
Right. Wow. It just shows you folks, you cannot. So June 11th is the Republican primary in South Carolina. If you don't study these candidates and just spend a few moments in your district, and understand who exactly that you're voting for, and go back and look at their voting records and hold people accountable for representing you the way that you want to be represented. Mm-hmm. You cannot complain about border crisis, voter integrity, higher taxes. We just raised another tax here in Charleston County or Dorchester County this week. You cannot complain about certain things when you're not either voting or understanding who you're voting for or doing your due diligence to determine who is the best candidate and who has not already been purchased, paid for by special interest groups or big business.
Yeah. Yeah. We had thousands of bills filed this session, and inevitably that's always the way it goes. I filed several dozen myself, didn't go anywhere. I filed a bill extremely similar to Texas's bill about how the state of Texas now can remove illegal immigrants from Texas without the feds getting involved.
Right.
So filed that. Yeah, went nowhere. A lot of good ideas left on the cutting room floor, I guess is the for the film analogy.
Right.
But even the things that are stated priorities of the majority caucus didn't get any attention. So we already talked about election integrity. As far as like spending goes, the budget, there was a lot of wacky stuff in the budget. There was some good stuff, raising teacher pay, law enforcement, supporting law enforcement with things that they need. Some conservation stuff I think was pretty decent. And but they mixed that in with a bunch of garbage of these pet projects.
Right.
And we did, when we talked about the budget the first time, the pet projects weren't in there. So
Right.
the Senate put theirs in, the House put theirs in. Now it's in conference. Here, one of them in the Senate was $400,000 for the town of Nices. And I don't know if you know where Nices is,
Next
Josh.
to Orangeburg.
It is near Orangeburg.
If you sneeze in Nices, you'll miss it.
You miss it. Correct. According to the last census, there are 420 people that
Right.
live in Nices. And it was $400,000 for their town museum. Now, I'm sure the people in Nices would appreciate that. However, when it comes to the actual like priorities of the state, it seems like we have other things we should be doing with that $400,000. Considering we still have the highest income tax in the South, we have other things we should be doing with it.
Right.
I mean, last year there was a couple $100,000 for an orangutan exhibit in Greenville Zoo. There's all kinds of just wacky, crazy stuff.
Right.
I mean, millions, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars in these pet projects in the budget. So again, kind of go back to your point, when these mailers go out saying, such and such, I've been kind of the victim of this, voted against teacher pay and law enforcement. Well, if you go back and look, when they vote on the budget, like when we vote on the budget, we vote in sections. So
Right.
law enforcement section, education section, so forth. Most of the time, this education section, the law enforcement section, those are unanimous. Like everybody's in favor of funding infrastructure and
Right.
law enforcement and education. Like everybody's on board with that. What we're not all on board with is the pet projects or the huge wasteful spending, the $1.3 billion in cash to a foreign company to build an EV electric plant.
Right.
Or in this case, I think the Senate version had $128 million going to Clemson to build a vet school that we already gave them $74 million in last year's budget for. Yeah. He's right. Huge, giant things like that, and those are the big ones, but there's, hundreds of thousands of dollars here and there to, there was one put in for a fitness center or a fitness program, like fitness and recovery program, last year's budget, $250,000, excuse me. And this place doesn't even have a building. Like they just operated for free out of somebody else's building.
Right.
And there's no way to follow up on where did that $250,000 go? What do they use it for? When they don't have rent to pay, what are they doing?
Right.
And so for-profit companies, a nonprofit, there's a ton of that kind of stuff.
I think we'll see a little bit more about that coming out in the coming days.
I think so.
We
need more sunlight on transparency.
We do. And I will say the Post and Courier, as many crazy things as they want to post about and talk about, they do every once in a while do their due diligence and really pull on some strings to unravel some corruption in politicians and local, state, all sorts of different groups. So look at these different papers and follow some of these trails. We got a race in the upstate. Adam Morgan's opponent, claims I never said this when on film, saying all sorts of different things related to DEI.
Right.
And then,
which, by the way, we passed a bill in the House to eliminate DEI statements from higher ed, so that state universities can't force employees to sign on DEI statements and do DEI trainings.
Right.
Senate didn't move on it at all, so that's dead. But literally last week, MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, they dropped their DEI requirements entirely.
Mm-hmm.
and said the president made a statement saying, "Hey, this is detrimental to our hiring practices. We think it's very important, like
To
whether it's
have the best.
neurobiology or engineering or whatever, to have the biggest open field possible." And then I think 2 days ago, I think it was Monday this week, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, yeah, your favorite,
Right.
they dropped, they eliminated their DEI department entirely,
Wow.
moved $2.3 million that was going to go to that into security because they have had a bit of an issue in the last few weeks with the Hamas protester folks.
Right.
So they just cut it entirely. So I sent a letter to the president of MUSC yesterday, earlier this week, I think it was yesterday, pointing that out and asking the MUSC, like, whether we pass this legislation or not this year, which we haven't, I think you should look at dropping it specifically for things like neurobiology and these high level stuff, these very niche fields.
We want to be known as the best. When you think
Right.
of MIT, you think of the best in the world, right?
Yep.
Lee, what do you want to go to school? MIT? Chapel Hill, why are they leading in the news? They had some young men doing something, courageous and saying, not on my campus. We're not going to cater to the fraction of a percent that have no idea. And if you go and ask any of them, why are you protesting? I have no idea.
Right.
I have no idea. This cute girl told me it's a good idea. And, it's just always something very silly. But Dr. David Cole, do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the president of MUSC, great surgeon.
Yeah.
And so last thing I want to bring up before we close, speaking of MUSC, we had the ability to defend our taxpayers for not having to get a jab.
Yeah.
Can you speak into that?
Yeah. So this year, talking about missed opportunities, we passed precisely 0 medical freedom bills, like nothing, as if we learned absolutely nothing from COVID and that whole experience of government overreach. In fact, not only did we not pass any medical freedom bills, during COVID, the legislature did pass a ban on state agencies requiring their employees to get the jab. But within that, there was a sunset provision. So that ban on jab mandates ended December 31st of 2023. So this past December.
Mm-hmm.
We knew that. We brought it up. My friend Stuart Jones wrote a bill to fix that so that we get rid of that sunset and permanently there would be no, state agencies would not be able to force their employees from getting any vaccination or medicine that has that's not fully FDA approved. So the emergency use authorization, the EAU, like that would be totally out of bounds. He filed the bill. It didn't even get a committee hearing, like nothing. The Senate, to their credit, did get to second reading on a bill, S 975, which is a very good bill.
Mm-hmm.
Did not get third reading before crossover, so we didn't have an opportunity in the House to hear it. But there was a House companion that we could have moved on and didn't. That 975 did a lot of good stuff. I'd encourage folks to go look at it, see what it did. But things about mandatory, not mandatory consent, but informed consent. People have to be told what they're getting, injected with, and getting written signature that they're okay with that as a bare minimum from at all ages. There was portions in there that said even private companies can't mandate any medical procedure where there is no liability on the manufacturer of whatever the medical thing is. So
Right.
whether it be a vaccine or medicine or whatever, if the company that made that vaccine or medicine or whatever, if they have no liability, they can't be sued, then you can't force someone to get it.
Right.
Which makes complete common sense to me.
Absolutely.
So there was a lot of good stuff in 975. It didn't go anywhere. So
So
we
will
passed
that
no
be
medical freedom.
will that be reintroduced next
I
session?
hope so. Yeah. I mean, I think we'll have a lot, if not all of these reintroduced
And
in
hopefully we'll
December
have some new state
for approved only.
senators, state
Yes.
representatives and state senators who actually care
Yep.
about these things.
The
And
entire state house, both House and Senate, is up for reelection. Most of those are going to come down to June 11th. So just a few weeks. Like many of them don't have competition in November, myself included. Just the way the districts are set up.
right.
So most of this is going to come down to June 11th. That's why people really, really need to pay attention and really, really need to go vote in just a few weeks.
It's not waiting till November
Mm-mm.
election. That is too,
No.
it's too, you're too late. If you
Yeah.
miss June 11th, you're too late to really clean house. And we do
Mhm.
need to clean house. There's some very important elections in this state that need our grassroots support. You
Yeah.
need to call these folks. Their phone numbers are on their websites. Hey, you've got my
Mhm.
support. Give them some encouragement.
Yeah.
People are counting the cost to become a state representative. It is not easy. Nobody's going out there saying, hey, I want to spend time away from my family. I want to
Mhm.
spend my own money. I want
Mhm.
to have more gray hair. I want to lose more hair. I want to spend every day outside in Charleston or in South
Yep.
Carolina in the humidity, walking door to door
Right.
to talk to people for my own health. They're people that actually care about being patriots, and they care
Mhm.
about freedoms, and they care about being grassroots and not being purchased and paid for. You will not
Yeah.
get a ton of mailers from them. You will not get and see tons of commercials. You will not, and you'll
Mm-mm.
see some attacks on these good people. Usually when you see an attack, you know that the people are scared.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of scared people out there.
And to your point, in the last over the last year of session, I noticed my first gray hairs coming in, and I don't know if that's from having a 2.5-year-old and a 6-month-old, or from being in the legislature, or the combination of the two. But yeah, it's coming in.
It's there. Too funny. Well, anyways, we thank you for all of your hard work. We just celebrate you and your time in the House. We just celebrate all the hard work that you've done. We celebrate the fact that you've represented not just Berkeley County, but all of the Christians and the truly conservative Christians in South Carolina, and that you are influencing others, that you are standing on a solid foundation of knowing what you really believe, and encouraging others to really understand what the Bible says about our freedoms, and about what we as Christians should know, think, and even when we don't know, we can have some trust that you do, and that you're giving thought, prayer, discernment, wisdom, knowledge, everything that you can, while you're there. And you're making some great relationships. You're representing the kingdom extremely well. So we celebrate that, Jordan.
Appreciate it. It's an honor to do it.
Absolutely. And we want some others like you, not just like you, but we want some others that really care about things as much as you, and care about the things of God, and that want
Amen.
God's will on earth to be as is in heaven. And we know that's truly your heart. And we want some others with the fear of the Lord and that feel that way too, and want to see the heaven here on earth and the will of God performed. So thank you guys for tuning into Current Situation Podcast in our 20th episode, 20 weeks. We are thankful for everybody that listens. Please share this podcast with other folks that you know that may be interested, or folks that you know are starting to ask some questions and want to get a little bit involved in politics. We're doing the best we can to try to make things understandable, and to give good perspective as a conservative Christian men of God. And so we hope you appreciate that perspective, and we look forward to sharing more with you in the coming weeks. Jordan is done with this part of legislative session, but we have so much more to share with you about politics, whether statewide, locally, or nationally, and we can't wait to share that with you.